Let us carry out a line by line atomization of the poem. Earth has not anything to show more fair. What a sweeping hyperbole! The poet takes the entire earth as his skin and declares that there is nothing on display there which is more fair, more beautiful than what he sees. And what he sees is London early in the morning. There is no doubt that the poet has fallen in love with what he sees. If I look at a girl and proclaim that she is the most beautiful girl in the world, I think it would be reasonable to conclude that I have fallen in love with that girl. Similarly, I think we can safely say that the poet is in love with what he sees. And that is why he proclaims that is why he declares that there is nothing more beautiful than what he sees in the entire earth. It is a case of instant infatuation. I would like to work out a contrast between the present poem and another famous London poem, London by William Blake, published in 1794 as part of the collection Songs of Experience. The poem begins thus, I quote, I wander through each chartered street, unquote. William Blake's London presents the city as a center of poverty, deprivation, child labor, prostitution, and immorality in the church and the palace. I would like to work out a contrast between the Wordsworth poem and yet another famous London poem, London by Samuel Johnson, published in 1738, shortly after Johnson had moved to the city. The London we meet with in the long poem is a hell of poverty, corruption, crime, and squalor. Those readers who tend to get carried away by the brilliance of the Wordsworth poem ought to constantly remind themselves of the Blake poem and the Johnson poem while reading the Wordsworth poem. Why is there such a spectacular contrast between the Wordsworth poem on the one hand and the Blake poem and the Johnson poem on the other? The first explanation is that Wordsworth was only passing through London. He was only a traveller through London and not a resident of London. While Wordsworth was only passing through London, Blake and Johnson lived in London. The second explanation is that Wordsworth was in London in order to go to Calais, in order to go to France. He was planning to meet his former mistress and his daughter, and so was in buoyant spirits. And this must have enabled him to write about London in such extremely glowing terms. The third explanation is that the London that we meet with in the Wordsworth poem is a city without people. It's early morning and the people are not visible, not yet visible. On the other hand, the London that we meet with in the Blake poem and in the Johnson poem is a city teeming with people. And in those two poems, the people are as important as the city. Since the London that we come across in the Wordsworth poem is a London minus its population, the city ceases to be problematic, permitting the poet to speak about it in golden terms. The final explanation is that the Wordsworth poem is naively simplistic, naively superficial, and that it does not bother to investigate beneath the surface. It refuses to comprehend the seamy side of London life. Now there's the question which I've already posed, whether Wordsworth betrayed his own ideology, whether Wordsworth ditched his own creed by writing upon Westminster Bridge. This is a question which you have to answer by the time this discussion comes to an end. The ideas in the opening line of the poem are fortified by what is said in the second line and in the third line. In the first line of the poem, the poet declares that there is nothing on earth, there is nothing on display on earth which is more beautiful, which is more beautiful than London. It would appear that the poet is not satisfied with this dramatic hyperbole. He reinforces the idea by stating that if anyone is able to be indifferent to such a sight so touching in its majesty, he would certainly be dull of soul. The poet's point is that anybody with even a slight artistic sensibility, with even a mild poetic sensibility, would be unable to overcome, to be indifferent to pass by the sight of London early in the morning. Now we come to two extremely beautiful lines in which the speaker explains that the city wears the beauty of the morning like a garment. and that it is silent, bare. There is no doubt that this is a very effective simile. The city wearing the beauty of the morning like a garment. The simile is simultaneously simple and brilliant. It is typically Wordsworthian. But there is a problem. If the city is wearing a garment, how can it be bare? The city can wear a garment and be silent. That is fine. But how can the city wear a garment and be bare? Bare means naked. Bare means without clothes. In fact, this was pointed out to Wordsworth by a female reader of the poem, and Wordsworth seriously thought of revising this part of the poem, but ultimately his efforts came to nothing. How can we give a rational explanation to this passage? How can we logically justify this passage? What does the city wear? It wears a garment. What is this garment? The morning, or more exactly, the beauty of the morning. Even after wearing the garment, the poet says that the city is bare. The obvious explanation is that the garment is a transparent garment. The garment is a garment which hides nothing, because the garment is the beauty of the morning. And this can be interpreted to mean the morning light. The city wears the garment made of the light of the morning, and the garment being absolutely transparent exposes the city completely, and the city is bare. The city is silent because it is early morning. The city has not woken up. But that is not something very problematic. I think I have explained the lines rather satisfactorily.